He was already walking away from the ICU doors, ring in his fist, when he heard another man at the counter asking for updates on the same woman, Maribel Ortiz. Cashin Blake stopped mid-step. His tailored suit still carried the scent of the boardroom he had bolted from 20 minutes ago when the hospital called. His hands shook as he turned back toward the nurse's station, where a man in worn work boots stood gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I'm her husband," the man said, voice cracking. "Derek Ortiz. Someone needs to tell me what's happening to my wife." Cashin's chest tightened. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A vending machine hummed in the corner. Nurses in scrubs moved past them like nothing unusual was unfolding. But these two men stood frozen in a private storm of grief and confusion. "Your wife." Cashin stepped forward, anger and fear twisting together in his gut. "I'm Cashin Blake. Maribel is my partner. I'm listed as her emergency contact." Derek's face went pale. His rough hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically through old photos. "We've been separated, but we never finalized. I thought she was just gone. I didn't know she was here. I didn't know she was." The word hung between them, unfinished. Cashin's mind raced back to hours earlier. Maribel's back pressed against their penthouse window, the city glowing behind her. Her hands on his shoulders gripping tight. A kiss that tasted like promises she was now breaking by disappearing behind those ICU doors. He could still feel the warmth of her skin, the way she whispered his name like it meant safety. Now, standing in this bright hospital corridor, none of it made sense. What would you do if you discovered someone else grieving your person like they were theirs? Have you ever wondered if you truly knew the person you loved? This is the problem with secrets inside relationships. They don't stay buried. They surface at the worst moments, when everything is already falling apart. A doctor in blue scrubs stepped into the waiting area, clipboard in hand. She looked between both men, her expression careful and measured. "I need to speak to Maribel's husband," she said slowly. In private, both men stood. Long before two men fought over her name at a hospital desk, Maribel had already learned what it meant to be owned and discarded. Houston heat pressed against thin curtains in the cramped apartment she once shared with Derek. Back then, he was different, charming, supportive. He worked double shifts at the warehouse while she built her cosmetics business from their kitchen table, filling orders for lip gloss and handmade candles late into the night. But success never came the way she planned. The big deal in Dallas fell through. Her business account got frozen over a paperwork mistake she couldn't afford to fix. That's when the shift started, slow at first, like water turning to ice. Derek's compliments turned into criticism. "You're wasting time on that junk," he would say, kicking over sample boxes scattered across the living room floor. "Nobody wants what you're selling." The insults turned into shoves. The shoves turned into bruises she learned to hide under long sleeves in the Texas summer. One night, Ray's voices cut through the tiny kitchen. Overturned boxes of product lay everywhere, months of work ruined on the floor. His hand on her wrist, her back against the counter. The look in his eyes that said he didn't see a person anymore, just something he owned that had stopped working right. She remembered the beginning, too. How his rough hands used to trace her waist on their mattress on the floor bedroom, making her feel wanted. She confused possession with love back then. She thought his intensity meant he cared. Be honest. Have you ever stayed too long somewhere just because you didn't want to start over? Tell me in the comments if you've ever confused comfort with love, even when comfort started cutting into your skin. After one final violent outburst, Derek slammed divorce papers on the table. "Get out," he said, voice flat and cold. She stood on the sidewalk that night with a single suitcase, everything she owned compressed into 40 pounds. Her phone buzzed in her hand, an overdraft alert from a bank. Negative $73. No family nearby, no plan, just the clothes on her back and a dream that felt like it was choking her. When the bus from Houston pulled into Atlanta, Maribel stepped off with more bruises than dollars. The city swallowed her whole. She crashed with distant cousins in a house that smelled like fried food and old carpet, sleeping on a couch that springs poked through. They didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. Every morning, She packed a backpack full of low-margin lip gloss and bottled water, heading to busy intersections to hustle. Sticky summer air clung to her skin at a midtown traffic light. Cars idled, windows rolled up, air conditioning blasting while she stood in the heat. She caught her reflection in a luxury SUV window, hair tied back, shirt sticking to her skin, eyes tired. This wasn't the driven girl who once shipped orders across the country. This was someone invisible. Rejection became routine. Drivers waved her off without looking. Some yelled. Most just pretended she didn't exist. Nights, she cried in borrowed beds, wondering if she would ever be more than a ghost in a city that didn't know her name. But she refused to quit. The idea of building something with her own name on it still burned inside her, even while she was living like she had already disappeared. One afternoon, rain started falling hard and fast. She stood at her usual corner, crate of products getting soaked, when a black SUV hit a puddle at full speed. Dirty water exploded over her, drenching her completely. She gasped, stumbling back, wiping rainwater and gutter grime from her eyes. The SUV stopped. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, expensive shoes somehow still dry. He looked at the soaked vendor in front of him, then at the faded label on her crate, and said her name slowly, carefully, like he was reading something fragile. Maribel Ortiz? Have you ever had to rebuild a life from scratch in a city where nobody knew your name? Drop a comment if you've ever felt invisible while trying to start over. Later, in the shower at her cousin's place, she traced old finger marks on her wrist, faded bruises from Derek's grip. She made a quiet vow, water running down her face. Never again. Never again would she let any man touch her from a place of contempt. He could have stayed in the car and driven off, but Cashin Blake did something he wasn't known for in boardrooms. He apologized and listened. I'm sorry, he said, holding an umbrella over both of them while rain pounded the street. That was careless. Let me at least pay for the damage. He pulled out his wallet. Maribel shook her head, exhausted and trembling. I don't need your guilt money, she said, voice cracking. I need people to actually care about what I'm trying to build. And then it all poured out. How her small brand collapsed in Dallas. How her husband threw her out. How she ended up hustling on Atlanta corners with products nobody wanted to buy. She didn't know why she was telling a stranger all this. Maybe because he was the first person in months who looked at her like she mattered. Cashin listened. Really listened. Not the fake boardroom nod, but the kind of attention that made her feel seen. Neon from nearby storefronts reflected on wet asphalt. Thunder rolled overhead. Her crate of candles and lip gloss sat between them like a tiny wrecked funeral for the business she once believed in. When he reached for one of her candles to examine the label, their hands brushed. Just for a second. But something jolted between them. A spark of awareness that felt wildly out of place in the middle of storm and exhaust fumes. You're better than this corner, Cashin said quietly. He pulled a business card from his jacket. Come to my office tomorrow. I can't promise anything, but I don't believe your story ends at this curb. If a stranger with everything offered you a second chance, would you trust it or assume there's a catch? Tell me below what you'd do in her place. Maribel stared at the card, rain soaking through her clothes, hands shaking. The address was in one of those glass towers she used to walk past, dreaming about the day her business would put her inside one. Cashin got back in his SUV. She stood on the corner, drenched and shaking, reading his name over and over until the ink started to blur. The next morning, Maribel walked into a lobby of glass and steel wearing second-hand heels that pinched and a dress she had ironed with a hair straightener. The security guard did a double take. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. But she had the card. She had the appointment. And she had nothing left to lose. The elevator ride felt endless. Mirrored walls showed every flaw. Wrinkled hem, chipped nail polish, hair that wouldn't quite cooperate. She tried to steady her breathing. Tried to remember that she used to run a business. Tried to believe she deserved to be here. Cashin met her in the lobby with coffee and genuine curiosity. No fakes, maíz. No piti. Just questions about her failed brand, about what went wrong, about what she would do differently if she had another shot. They moved to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Atlanta skyline. sample jars, and rough sketches of logos spread out between them on the table. He asked about her suppliers, her margins, her vision. She answered, voice gaining strength with every word. I grew up in a cramped apartment, Cashin said suddenly. My mom worked 3 jobs. I scored my first tech win on a laptop I bought from pawn shop. I know what it's like to build something from nothing. She looked at him differently then, not as the man in the expensive suit, but as someone who understood hunger. The moment she laughed for the first time in months, really laughed, at one of his self-deprecating stories about a pitch meeting gone wrong. He couldn't stop staring at the curve of her smile. Later, when they bent over a laptop together, reviewing supplier contracts, their shoulders nearly touched. The air between them charged with something neither one named. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like your failures were just the first draft, not the final version of you? Comment if you've had that turning point conversation that changed everything. As she headed for the door hours later, relieved and exhausted and hopeful, he called her back. One more thing, Cashin said, leaning against the doorframe. How do you feel about partnership instead of just employment? The door closed before she could answer, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it through the glass. Stay with this story. Comment below and tell me, have you ever had someone believe in you when you stopped believing in yourself? 6 months later, the woman who once begged drivers to try a $3 lip balm was walking onto a live stream as the polished co-founder of a rising beauty brand. Everything moved fast. Photo shoots where makeup artists fussed over her hair. Marketing campaigns that turned her face into billboards across Atlanta. Orders shipping out again, this time by the thousands. Miami influencers tagging her products in posts that racked up comments faster than she could read them. And through it all, Cashin stood beside her, restructuring the company, so her name sat right next to his on every legal document. She should have felt nothing but grateful. She did feel grateful. But the shadows came back at night. Nightmares where Derek's hands were on her throat, where she woke up gasping in expensive sheets that didn't feel like they belonged to her. Fear whispered that she didn't deserve this level of care, that any moment now someone would realize she was still just a broken girl from Houston pretending to be somebody. Bright studio lights blazed as cameras rolled. A makeup artist powdered Maribel's face while she ran through talking points in her head. Offset, Cashin watched, tie loosened, expression caught somewhere between business pride and personal hunger. She felt his eyes on her even when she wasn't looking. After the successful launch event, they shared champagne in his office. Just the two of them, city lights glowing through the windows. Her lipstick left a mark on the rim of her glass. His gaze lingered on her bare throat as she reached up to unclasp a tight necklace, fingers fumbling with the catch. He stood, moved closer, the air between them charged with everything they hadn't said yet. His hand touched her jaw. She leaned in. Their lips almost met. A knock at the door. An assistant bursting in with updated sales numbers, breathless and apologetic. The moment shattered. Have you ever sworn you'd never fall again, only to feel yourself getting pulled towards someone anyway? Drop a comment if you fought that kind of chemistry and lost. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Maribel scrolled through her phone. An unknown number had called. Again, and again, and again. 7 missed calls while she was at the event. She stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the voicemail icon. The name flashed. Derek. First time in over a year. The same voice that once told her she was nothing now sounded small and defeated on the other end of the line. Mavi? Derek's voice cracked. Background noise suggested a bar or somewhere loud and cheap. I know I got no right to call. I needed to hear your voice. She sat on the floor of her upscale Atlanta kitchen, back pressed against the cabinets. City lights blinked outside like distant warning signs. Her hand shook holding the phone. What do you want? Her voice came out harder than she felt. He was drunk. That much was clear, but not the mean drunk she remembered. This was something sadder, more broken. He talked about losing his warehouse job 3 months ago, about the apartment he couldn't afford anymore, about sitting in his truck some nights, wondering what the point was of waking up the next day. I was wrong, he said, and she heard him crying. Actually crying. Something he never did before, even when he was hurting her. About everything. About you. I threw away the only person who ever believed in me. Maribel's chest tightened. Anger, pity, and something more dangerous. A flicker of responsibility for his downfall that she knew she shouldn't feel but couldn't stop. I'm not that person anymore, she whispered. I know. I see you online sometimes. You're doing good. Real good. I'm proud of you, Mari. I just wanted you to know that. Silence stretched between them. She could hear his ragged breathing, could picture him exactly as he used to be, motor oil under his nails, shoulders hunched, pride wounded and rotting in a cruelty. But unwanted sensory memories flooded back anyway. The scent of motor oil and cologne on his shirt in their early days. The way his stubble scratched her neck when he kissed her apologetically after a fight. The weight of his arm across her waist on Sunday mornings before everything went bad. If you ever come back to Texas, he said carefully, even just passing through. I like to talk. Just to talk. I'm trying to get sober. Trying to be better. I know it don't fix nothing, but I have to go. She cut him off. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Mar. For everything. If the person who broke you called in tears, would you hang up or hear them out? Tell me honestly, what would you have done? She ended the call. Sat in the dark. Told herself she had moved on. Told herself Derek was the past and Cashin was the future, and there was no reason to ever look back. 2 days later, she booked a cheap ticket to Houston under a modified version of her name. She told Cashin she was flying to a women's business conference in Chicago. The man waiting in the cracked vinyl booth looked older, smaller, and yet one word from him still made her chest tighten. Mari. The diner was nearly empty. Fluorescent sign buzzing outside. Coffee cooling in chipped mugs that had seen better decades. Rain streaked the window while trucks rumbled past on the highway, headlights cutting through the gray afternoon. Derek stood when she walked in, like he was trying to remember how to be respectful. His work boots were scuffed. His shirt was clean but worn thin at the collar. He looked like a man who had lost everything and was still trying to figure out how it happened. Thanks for coming, he said quietly. I didn't think you would. She slid into the booth across from him, keeping her coat on, keeping her distance. I can't stay long. They sat in awkward silence. A waitress refilled coffee neither of them touched. Derek talked about losing his job, about the divorce papers he never signed because some part of him couldn't let go, about waking up afraid that he would die alone and nobody would care. He admitted things she never thought she'd hear from him. How his dad used to hit his mom, how he swore he'd never become that, how ashamed he was that he did anyway. You were the only one who ever believed in me, he said, voice breaking. And I destroyed that. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know I see it now. I see what I did. He cried openly, right there in the diner, tears running down his face while his rough hands gripped the edge of the table. Maribel felt her heart split in 2 directions. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to make him feel every bruise he ever left. The other part, the part that once loved him when they were both just scared kids trying to survive, wanted to reach across the table and tell him it was going to be okay. I'm glad you're getting help, she said finally. But I can't be part of your healing. You understand that, right? I know. He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I just wanted to say it, to your face, that I'm sorry. If someone who hurt you told you they'd changed, would you trust their tears or see another performance? Comment with walk or stay? Which would you choose? She stood to leave. He stood too. Before she could step away, he pulled her into a clumsy hug. Not forceful, just desperate. His arms around her like he was holding onto the last good thing he ever had. His lips brushed her temple. She closed her eyes for a split second too long. Long enough to remember what it felt like when they used to cling to each other after brutal fights. Love and damage tangled together in ways she couldn't separate. Then she pulled away, walked out into the rain. Didn't look back, but she didn't block his number either. In Atlanta, she was a visionary co-founder on magazine covers. In Houston, she slipped into the shadows of an old neighborhood where nobody knew she now lived in a skyline apartment. The pattern started small. 1 weekend trip back to Texas became 2, then 3. She told Cashin she was visiting family, checking on her sick cousin, attending networking events. He believed her because why wouldn't he? She had never given him reason to doubt. Weekdays belonged to Atlanta, to building the company with Cashin, to strategy sessions that ran late into the night. Both of them sprawled on his office couch with laptops and takeout containers, to industry events where his hand rested at the small of her back, guiding her through crowds like she was something precious, to slow mornings in his penthouse where he kissed her forehead and told her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Some weekends belonged to Houston, to sitting in quiet bars with Derek while he nursed ginger ale instead of whiskey, to cheap motels where they talked about who they used to be and who they were trying to become, to dark side streets where his calloused fingers lit her cigarette, both of them pretending this was normal, that people did this kind of thing all the time. Her addiction shifted from external survival to emotional validation. One man represented the future, success, stability, the life she always wanted. The other represented the past, the girl she used to be, the broken parts she couldn't fully bury. Airport concourses became her second home. Security lines, departure gates, the weight of living two lives pressing down on her chest every time she boarded a plane. In Atlanta, Cashin kissed her forehead before they fell asleep after late-night strategy sessions, his breathing steady against her hair. In Houston, Derek kissed her knuckles like a man begging for one more chance at being human, his grip careful now, afraid to hold too tight. Can a heart be loyal to two different versions of itself? Tell me, have you ever felt torn between who you were and who you're becoming? On a return flight to Atlanta, turbulence shook the plane. Maribel gripped the armrest, stomach twisting. She pulled out her phone in airplane mode, opened her period tracking app. The screen glowed, 11 days late. Her hands started shaking. Her mind raced through dates, locations, nights that blurred together. Atlanta, Houston, Cashin, Derek, the same body moving between two stories, two cities, two men who had no idea the other existed. The plane touched down. She stayed in her seat long after everyone else deplaned, staring at that number, panic rising in her throat like she was drowning. The pregnancy test turned positive faster than any investor ever said yes to her ideas. Maribel sat in their glass-framed bathroom, city lights reflecting on the tile. The test lay on the counter, those two pink lines screaming louder than any words could. She did the math in her head. Once, twice, 3 times, each time hoping the answer would change. She couldn't be sure. The timeline was too close. The dates too blurred. Atlanta and Houston, Cashin and Derek. It all ran together in a mess she couldn't untangle. When she told Cashin that night, he reacted with stunned joy. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in their kitchen while takeout containers sat forgotten on the counter. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, like he couldn't believe it. Like this was the thing he didn't know he was waiting for. "I'm going to give you everything," he promised, hand on her face, eyes shining. "You and our child. Everything." She smiled, nodded, let him hold her, hid the terror eating through her chest. That night, they moved slowly, aware of the new life between them. His hands on her waist were gentle, reverent, like he was memorizing every curve for the days he knew might become more fragile. She kissed him back, tried to lose herself in the moment, tried to believe that this was simple and good and exactly what it looked like. But it wasn't, and she knew it. If you were in her shoes, pregnant, with a blurred timeline and 2 men in your history, would you confess everything or protect the happiness right in front of you? Common truth or silence? After Cashin fell asleep, his hand resting on her stomach, Maribel sneaked into the bathroom. She opened a hidden folder on her phone, the one where she kept messages she shouldn't have kept. The most recent one from Derek glowed on the screen. "I had a dream you brought our family back. Woke up smiling for the first time in years. Just wanted you to know you still make me believe in good things." She stared at those words, at the man sleeping in the next room, at her reflection in the mirror, a woman caught between 2 versions of a life, carrying a secret that would destroy them both. She closed the phone, turned off the light, went back to bed, and said nothing. Who do you think is the father? Comment below and tell me. Could you carry a secret this big, or would the weight crush you? Pregnancy made every secret heavier, and the first crack did not appear in her body. It appeared in her story. Cashin started noticing things. Small things at first. The way Maribel's face would go blank when he asked about her weekend trips. How she never had photos from the conferences she claimed to attend. The receipts that didn't match the cities she said she visited. "You told me you were in Chicago," he said one night, holding up his phone. "But a tabloid blog just posted a photo of you in Houston. Same weekend. Same dress." Her blood went cold. The grainy image showed her outside that diner. Rain in the background, a figure beside her that was blurred but unmistakably male. "It's a mistake," she said quickly. "Someone must have mixed up old photos." He wanted to believe her. She could see it in his eyes. But doubt had crept in, and doubt was a poison that spread. Business stress made everything worse. A big investor wanted to push expansion during her third trimester. Boardroom presentations where Maribel steadied herself against a chair, catching her breath while a slide of record sales glowed behind her. Her body was changing fast. Her secrets were getting harder to hide. She nearly fainted in a supermarket aisle while choosing baby clothes alone. A stranger caught her arm, asked if she needed help. She shook her head, paid quickly, left without buying anything. In Houston, Derek grew more clingy, more desperate. He sensed he was losing her again. His texts came more frequently. "When can I see you? Are you okay? I miss you, Mari." One night, after a particularly brutal argument about her travel, Cashin pulled her close. Their kiss felt like both apology and distraction. His hands in her hair, her back against the wall, both of them avoiding the real conversation that needed to happen. "I love you," he whispered against her mouth. "Just tell me the truth. Whatever it is, we can handle it." But she couldn't. The words stuck in her throat like stones. Have you ever tried to hold a perfect image together while everything underneath was shaking? Tell me if you've ever been afraid that truth would cost you love. At a routine checkup the following week, the doctor frowned at the monitor, called in another nurse. They exchanged looks that made Maribel's heart race. "We may need to keep you for observation tonight," the doctor said gently, adjusting the equipment. Maribel's phone buzzed nonstop in her bag. Cashin, Derek, both men asking where she was. Both men wanting answers she couldn't give. The night Maribel's heart betrayed her, the same glowing red emergency sign pulled two men to the same hallway. Labor started early. Too early. She was only 34 weeks when the pain hit like a punch to the gut. The hospital kept her overnight for observation, but by morning, everything had spiraled. Monitors screaming. Nurses moving with focused urgency. Doctors using words like distress and complications that made her vision blur. Cashin was in a late-night meeting across town when the hospital called. He bolted, leaving investors sitting at the table with half-signed contracts. His hand shook so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. Money and influence couldn't fix this. For the first time in years, he was completely powerless. In Houston, Derek was scrolling through his phone when a relative messaged him. Someone who still followed Maribel online had seen a vague post about her being in an Atlanta hospital. He didn't think, didn't pack, just got in his truck and drove through the night, 8 hours straight, fueled by coffee and fear. By the time Cashin arrived, they were already prepping Maribel for an emergency procedure. He signed consent forms with shaky hands, barely reading the words. "Twins," someone said. "Did you know there were twins?" He nodded numb. Earlier that day felt like a lifetime ago. Her guiding his hand to where the babies kicked strongest, her lips brushing his wrist as she thanked him for believing in her future. Derek stumbled into the waiting room just as the doctor was called away. Rumpled clothes, stubble on his jaw, eyes wild with panic. He asked for Maribel Ortiz at the front desk, voice breaking on her name. That's when Cashin heard him. That's when everything stopped. If everything you loved was behind a door you weren't allowed to open, how far would you go to protect it? Comment with how you handle feeling completely powerless. The doctor stepped out hours later. She looked between both men, Cashin in his expensive suit, Derek in his worn jeans, and took a slow breath. "Mr. Blake," she called. Cashin stepped forward. So did Derek. "I'm her husband," Derek said hoarsely. The doctor's expression shifted. Confusion. Then something heavier. "There are two babies," she said carefully. And we need to talk about legal guardianship. But first, she paused, choosing her next words like they might break something. I'm very sorry. Maribel didn't make it. In the neonatal unit, two tiny lives fought for warmth while the adults who had shaped their destinies stood on opposite sides of the glass. The twins were so small. Tubes and blankets and machines keeping them breathing. A boy and a girl, the nurses said, both under 5 pounds. Both fighting like their mother had fought her whole life. Maribel was gone. The words didn't feel real. Cashin stood at the glass, hand pressed flat against it, trying to understand how the woman he loved had vanished while carrying their future. Derek stood on the opposite side, shoulders shaking, face buried in his hands. Paperwork became chaos. Hospital staff discovered conflicting records. One set listed Cashin Blake as spouse and emergency contact. Another older record, never updated, still tied her last name to Derek Ortiz. Both men claimed legal standing. Both men were drowning in grief and confusion. Soft blue light filled the neonatal unit. Muffled arguments drifted from the hall where lawyers and social workers started circling. Words like custody and paternity and next of kin floated through the air like knives. Cashin's grief turned to anger. Who are you? He demanded, finally confronting Derek directly. Why didn't I know you existed? I could ask you the same thing. Derek shot back, voice raw. We were married. She left me. I thought she moved on. I didn't know she was... He gestured helplessly toward the babies. I didn't know any of this. They stood there, two strangers connected by the same ghost. Flashback images hit them both. Cashin remembered slow mornings with Maribel in his shirt, making coffee in their penthouse kitchen, her laugh filling the space like sunlight. Derek remembered nights in their old Houston apartment when they clung to each other like staying together was the only way to outrun poverty, her belief in him the only thing keeping him human. Both men loved her. Both men lost her. And neither one knew the full truth of who she had been. Can you love someone fully if you never let yourself see their whole truth? Tell me if you think secrets can ever be acts of protection, or if they're always betrayal. A hospital social worker approached them days later, clipboard in hand. Gentlemen, she said quietly, to help clear the file and establish guardianship, we need to conduct paternity testing. It's standard procedure in cases like this. Cases like this. As if women died carrying impossible secrets every day. Both men agreed, neither one aware that the results would be stranger and more binding than either could imagine. The envelope in the lawyer's hand was thin, but what it carried would rewrite every memory both men had of Maribel. 3 weeks had passed. The funeral was done. Maribel buried in a cemetery outside Atlanta under a stone that listed only her name and years, as if a life that complicated could be reduced to dates. The twins were gaining strength, growing stronger in their incubators, unaware of the war being waged over their futures. Cashin and Derek sat across from each other in a small conference room, a family lawyer between them, a social worker taking notes. The air was thick with tension and exhaustion. Neither man had slept properly in weeks. The lawyer opened the envelope slowly. Read the contents, then read them again, as if checking for mistakes. This is highly unusual, she said carefully. But the results are clear. Each of you is biologically connected to one child. Silence. What? Cashin leaned forward, certain he'd misheard. It's rare, the lawyer continued, but documented. The medical term is heteropaternal superfecundation. 2 eggs, 2 fathers, conceived within days of each other. Your DNA, Mr. Blake, matches the male infant. Your DNA, Mr. Ortiz, matches the female infant. The room spun. Derek's face went white. Cashin's hands clenched on the table, expensive cufflinks catching the light next to Derek's cracked knuckles. Maribel had been with both of them, at the same time, carrying 2 stories in one body. The same woman who smiled at Cashin over morning coffee had been slipping away to Houston, to Derek, to a past she couldn't let go. She lied to both of us, Cashin said, voice hollow. Or maybe she was trying to survive both of us, Derek whispered. Flashes of her during pregnancy, lying in different beds, in different cities, her hand on her stomach as if trying to hold two worlds together. No graphic details, just the weight of her choices pressing down on every memory. Cashin struggled with the idea of sharing any part of this future. He wanted to control this, fix it, make it make sense. But you can't control the dead. You can only honor them or fight over their remains. Derek confronted a harder truth. His child existed because a woman he shattered still came back to him in secret. She never stopped believing he could be better, even when he proved her wrong over and over. If you found out you shared parenthood with a person who once hurt the same woman you loved, could you ever sit at the same table? Comment, fight, or build? What would your heart push you toward? The lawyers set the report down, folded her hands. Gentlemen, I have to ask, do you want to drag this through court, custody battles, lawyers, years of fighting, or do you want to decide together what Maribel would have wanted for these children? The question hung in the air. Both men turned to look through the window at the nursery. Two tiny babies, unaware that their existence was both a gift and a fracture that would never fully heal. Years later, two little kids raced through a community center in Atlanta that carried their mother's name, arguing over which dad made better pancakes. "Dad makes them fluffy," the girl shouted, pigtails bouncing as she ran. "But Pops puts chocolate chips in his," the boy countered, chasing after her. Cashin and Derek stood near the entrance, watching them with expressions somewhere between pride and exhaustion. The twins were 5 now, old enough to run and talk and ask questions that didn't have easy answers. Old enough to know they had two dads who didn't live together but showed up for every birthday, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. The community center had opened 2 years ago, funded by the beauty brand Maribel and Cashin built together. The Maribel Ortiz Foundation, dedicated to supporting women leaving violent relationships. Job training, financial literacy, temporary housing. Everything she wished she'd had when she fled Houston with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. A wall mural dominated the main hall. Maribel's face, smiling, holding sample products in her hands. Below, women sat in classrooms learning skills that could change their lives. The twins often traced the letters of her name with small fingers, asking questions about the mom they would never remember but would carry with them always. Cashin had softened over the years, learned that control wasn't the same as protection. He couldn't fix what happened, couldn't rewrite the past, but he could show up. He could be present. He could raise his son knowing that love sometimes meant sharing space with people you never thought you'd forgive. Derek had done the slow, painful work of sobriety and accountability. 2 years sober now, working construction, living in a small apartment, sending child support every month without fail. His daughter would grow up knowing exactly who he used to be. The lawyers and Cashin made sure of that. But she would also see who he was trying to become. Memory sequences flickered through both men's minds sometimes. Cashin standing alone on the rooftop where he once held Maribel, city lights below, whispering a thank you into the night for the son she gave him before she left. Derek visiting the old Houston apartment building, laying flowers on the doorstep where he first watched her leave, apologizing to a ghost for all the ways he failed her. If someone loved you in all your broken versions and still tried to leave something better behind, how would you honor them? Tell me in the comments what part of Maribel's journey hit you the hardest. The twins ran back, breathless and laughing. "Can we get ice cream?" they asked in unison. "Ask your other dad," both men said at the same time, then looked at each other with reluctant smiles. Later, after ice cream and playground time, after the kids fell asleep in the back seat during the drive to Cashin's house, the girl stirred and asked a question she'd been holding. "Why did Mom love you both?" Cashin and Derek exchanged a look in the rearview mirror. A long, complicated look that carried 5 years of shared grief and hard-earned peace. Derek answered softly, voice steady in a way it hadn't been years ago. "Because she believed we could become the men she needed us to be, even if we learned too late." The car rolled through Atlanta streets, the city where Maribel rebuilt herself, where she loved and lied and tried to hold together a life that was always going to break. The line she once crossed to save others had transformed into a legacy that protected women like her. Her name on a building. Her face on a wall. Her children growing up knowing their mother fought for something bigger than herself. The story ends there, on the unresolved ache and fragile hope in that answer. On two men raising two children, bound together by a woman who contained multitudes. On the question that hangs over every choice, every love, every secret kept in the dark. Which version of love are you choosing in your own life? That's Maribel's story. Tell me in the comments. Did she make the right choices? Could she have done it differently? What would you have done in her place?